My name's Brian Keel, and today I'm going to be talking about how film has influenced American society and the relationship between society in America and film. Film was created in England in the very late 1800s by English photographers who were experimenting with motion pictures. Some very influential early motion pictures would be things like The Gallop and The Run, in which these photographers would take many pictures of running or galloping horses and running men, and then they would put them together in a compilation, and then you would have what really was a short film, a bunch of pictures stacked together, and it made it look like one fluid motion. That being said, film as compared to most other art forms is very, very, very new, being that it was created in the late 1800s. And yet, film has already made its way onto a global stage. Film is found in virtually every culture in every corner of the world, whether you go to a developing country in East Africa or some of the most wealthy countries in the whole world, like in Western Europe, you will have flourishing film in all of those places. And the reason for that is because film influences the way that we, as members not of just American society, but simply a human society, it influences the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we behave and interact with our environment. And that is crucial to the development not just of American society, but of, as I said, human society in general. And also, this, like any influential power or force that humans control, has been used for both good and evil. An example of this could be propaganda, which can be used to sway the public's opinion towards or against something in favor of a certain political ideology, which can be a good thing sometimes, but is usually a bad thing, or is at least used to keep a populace complacent, or to resist or try to prohibit any thought that challenges a certain regime or any kind of political party or figure that is in power at the time. A specific example of propaganda would be during the reign of Mao Zedong. In China, he instituted something called a Cultural Revolution, in which he would publish many films that the public would actually be required to sit through that would be very pro the communist regime of China. This took place in the 60s and 70s in China until Mao Zedong was overthrown. Another good example, of course, would be Kim Jong-un in North Korea, Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. There are many examples of film being used to push propaganda versus being used to further human rights and civil advancement and just benefit humanity in general. In America, though, film has not really been used as propaganda, but has been used in those senses to further rights and to create a more influential and beneficial art form. The Roaring Twenties was huge for American film. It gave birth to 5 major studios, being Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM, Paramount, 20th Century Fox, RKO Radio, and Warner Brothers Studios. And, I mean, these studios were incredibly influential, from MGM's Gone with the Wind all the way to their 2001: A Space Odyssey, to Paramount's Forrest Gump and The Godfather. These studios' reputations were established ever so quickly, and they still remain today. How did they do it? Because they influenced American culture extremely, and the relationship that they built and developed with the youth of America throughout every generation from their creation on, it was undefeatable. I would say the golden age of film occurred during the counterculture movement from the mid-60s to the mid-80s. Movies like Bonnie and Clyde struck a chord with the youth across America, and it validated feelings of alienation and estrangement from society, while films such as Psych Out and Wild in the Streets affirmed behaviors associated with the movement, such as casual sex extremely heightened usage of LSD, marijuana, and psychedelic drugs, as well as wild parties that a lot of youth in America would attend. And soon this movement would spread to countries in Western Europe, such as the UK and France and Germany. And so then you have American film actually crossing the sea and associating itself and influencing the youth of other nations. That is one very good example of how influential film can be, not just on a national scale, but on a global scale. Film's newfound alliance with the youth of America during this time led to a solidified influence over the next several generations. This being said, this period is where the youth of America really got hooked on film, and that has kind of stayed with us from this generation in the 60s on. Movies during this 20 or so year period often contained themes of crime and or violence. Note films like The Godfather, Goodfellas, A Clockwork Orange, Pulp Fiction, all films that are noted constantly as classics, but contain very graphic themes of violence and nudity, sexual crimes, violent crimes. These movies contain all of that. And when these movies aimed to stretch the thresholds of film and to push it to new limits, heightened violence was introduced. Studies have shown, almost unanimously, that consumption of violent media reduces empathy and causes fear and anger. So when children are exposed to this heightened level of violence in the media, they then begin to exhibit violent characteristics and violent behaviors, and begin to fear the environment around them, and they become angry at people that they should normally trust. Based off of this, one could deduce that heightened violence in media during this time period led to increased rates of violent crime in America that was ended by rising incomes, decreased lead exposure, the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, and more. So basically, the violence in these films during the 60s and 70s, when the children that were exposed to that grew up, they then committed violent crimes because they were affected and influenced so heavily by these films. Movies also often depict historical events, which can shape the populace's view of them. A good example of this would be The Passion of the Christ. A lot of people, before that movie was released, had never really seen a graphic depiction of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And whether or not you are a Christian, it is important to note that America, being a predominantly Christian society, at least at the time of the film, that was a heavily influential film. Movies such as City of God take us out of our element and display truths of the world that we as Americans don't have to face. This is a movie that is about developing nations. And we, as the epitome, the paragon of a first world nation, do not have to experience the hardships that are so beautifully showcased in this film. On top of this, film can change ideas and shed new light on subjects, and can bring about different perspectives on some very, very sensitive and controversial topics. Some examples lately would be in the film Moonlight, where it depicts a black gay man's journey to finding his own sexuality and coming to terms with it and accepting it in a society that may not be very accepting of it. That's one example of a film that can not only provide comfort to marginalized groups or people who feel victimized or feel isolated from society, which is a recurring theme with any generation as far as youth goes. It can provide aid to those people, but it can also bring awareness to certain issues that everyone in America can face. So overall, from its creation on, film and the growth of American society have had an incredibly intricate and close relationship. And I would wager that any art form today, as we know it, at least in America, if not on a global scale, would not be the same had American film not progressed the way it did. Thank you.